Are we facing chaos and disruption? Or is this all just a bit more Project Fear? Well, let's talk about this with Dominic Grieve. He's Conservative MP for Beaconsfield, a leading Remain campaigner, and he's chairman of the Intelligence and Security Committee in the House of Commons. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Must also say that you're also one of the group of senior Tory MPs who last night threatened to quit the party and help bring down the government in a confidence vote in the Commons if Theresa May does push the button on a no-deal Brexit. Why do you fear a no-deal Brexit so much?
A no-deal Brexit will cause chaos. If my colleagues are seriously talking about a departure from the EU without any trade deal, that will have massive consequences to our ability to trade and do business. And if they're not talking about peripheral deals, then in that case there will be added chaos in relation to travel and other things that we take for granted.
You say that, and yet you did stand on a manifesto in 2017 at the election then, which said that, along with the rest of your party, that no deal was better than a bad deal. It actually said that in the manifesto. We continue to believe that no deal is better than a bad deal for the UK, but we will enter into the negotiations in a spirit of sincere cooperation and committed to getting the best deal for Britain. Well, no one could argue that the Prime Minister hasn't entered into the negotiations with the spirit of sincere cooperation. I mean, she's virtually been on the side of the EU. The deal could not be better for the EU. They're getting 39 billion quid in return for basically us pretty much remaining in the EU to all intents and purposes, never able to leave. It's clearly a bad deal. Even you think it's a bad deal as a Remainer. So clearly the alternative is no deal. So why would you have to resign the whip?
The alternative, the deal is a bad deal. The alternative is even worse. The only terms on which we are likely to be able to leave the EU are the terms the Prime Minister has negotiated. If people want to leave the EU on those terms, then so be it. As a Democrat, I have to accept it. But my view is that it's got to be put back to the public, because what we're discussing now is not what we were discussing at the time of the referendum in 2016, which was an abstract concept. And we've got to get realistic about this. If people feel that leaving the EU is so important to them, as I think you do, for example, well, then we will leave on terms which will do us severe economic damage. And we can make that damage even greater if we want to. But I think we should be asking people if that's what they really want.
Do you believe that people believe this Project Fear? Because, again, so much of this is predicated on, well, look, why would you want to do this when it's going to cause so much economic damage? Leavers like me don't believe that it will cause economic damage. There'll be disruption in the short term from a no deal. Absolutely. Of course, the disruption. Democracy is a little bit messy like that. Any changes causes uncertainty and disruption. But in terms of, I would say, very short to medium term onwards, we are going to be having the economic benefits from it. So the premise in which you are saying, well, this is now much worse than we thought it was, we need to go back to the people, I don't really accept that premise, and I think a lot of Leave voters don't.
I'm sure you hold your views with complete sincerity, but I also hold mine, and I happen to believe you're wrong. And I also note that those experts who get derided all say the same thing, which is that leaving the EU is going to do us a very great deal of damage. The Prime Minister has tried to negotiate a deal that minimises that damage, but people don't like the deal, and for understandable reasons. There are many aspects of it I don't like at all. But if you to then say, well, as we don't like this, we're going to do another deal which is even worse, seems to me to be a very strange thing to do indeed.
Yet you say the experts, and again, you know as well as I do that Michael Gove, your Tory colleague, wasn't deriding experts. We go all the way back to 2016. But the experts, a lot of them are saying the same thing. The establishment as a whole, the Bank of England, the Treasury, the IMF, or whatever, they all are saying the same thing. But the trouble is, they also said the same thing about a vote to leave in the first place, which and no one believes that Project Fear now, because it turned out, quite frankly, not to be true. In fact, it was the opposite of the truth, because you can understand why people don't believe there would be any particular issues. And yes, there'll be some disruption, but that's not the same as economic Armageddon, is it?
Not exactly the opposite of the truth. Investment has slowed. Our economy is sluggish. Our economy was the fastest growing in Europe. It's now the slowest. And if there's a global downturn, which looks
simply
quite
not
likely,
true,
we will
Dominic.
go into recession. But it is true.
It's not true. We've got among the highest growth levels
no.
in the EU.
The UK economy since 2016 has slowed dramatically. And at a time when our growth should be high because there's been a global economic boom. We are not benefiting from that fully.
There is not. Currently, the global trade is actually slowing. We have one of the highest growth rates in the EU. We've got one of the lowest unemployment rates in the EU. Inward investment to the EU is at its highest for years. Those statistics simply aren't true, Dominic.
Forgive me. You can continue to recite these mantras for as long as you like, but I'm afraid they're wrong. They're simply wrong. And if people are not prepared to pay attention to the real world around them, then we will reap the consequences of it. But as I say, I'm a Democrat. If people want to leave the EU, then there is a way of leaving the EU through the Prime Minister's deal. But I think people should approve it.
OK. All right, then, Dominic Grieve. Let's take your premise that you think this is going to be very bad news and that people didn't really know that that's what they were voting for and all that. And so let's make darn sure that is what they're voting for. So you're one of those who wants a second referendum. What should be the question in the second referendum? Because a lot of people would say, well, OK, you want a second referendum on how we leave. That's one thing. But is there any reason why Remain should be on the ballot paper since we've already been asked that question and we've already given an answer?
Because the opportunity to remain is there. And if people don't wish to leave with the Prime Minister's deal, it seems reasonable to ask whether, in fact, they wish to remain because they have taken a new view about our future. That seems to me to be a completely reasonable and democratic thing to do. And it can be done quite quickly as well.
We say it can be done quite quickly. Talk me through the machinations, because a lot of people are very unclear now about what the processes are. And we'll talk about this withdrawal agreement coming back to the Parliament in the week of the 14th of January, before this 21st of January sort of self-imposed deadline by the Prime Minister on announcing what we're going to do on the 29th of March. It looks like that deal, if it's brought back, will fail. Is that when the process starts to move for a second referendum?
We could move forward to a second referendum at that point. We could organise a second referendum and put that choice to the public. And I think my best estimate, having served on a commission that looks at how referendums are conducted, is it could probably be done in 12 to 15 weeks. So that's rather faster than some people have predicted, and we could get it all done and dusted by the end of April. And if people want to leave, well, then we can leave on the terms that have been negotiated. And if people don't want to leave, then we don't.
But of course, you say if the earliest possible scenario would be by the end of April. As you say, realistically, it'd probably be longer than that. The EU have said they would be willing for us to extend the period of negotiations just by a few months if there were a reasonable constitutional reason, and a referendum would be a reasonable reason. So let's say it was extended to, say, June or July. You had the second referendum, but I think the view seems to be it would only be able to be extended once, and at that point, as soon as we've had that referendum, if there was a vote for no deal, then we would definitely be leaving. There would have to be an awful lot of planning done for that sudden decision to leave, or at that point, presumably, we then stay in.
Well, if we vote to stay in, we stay in. Maintaining the status quo is not very difficult. If we are voting to leave, then I would expect us to leave very quickly, within a matter of days, a very short time afterwards. It's true that we still have to get the legislation in place for the Withdrawal Agreement Act, but that could be done while the referendum is taking place as a contingency. But those things can be done together.
But even if you believe that there are economic consequences that you believe are madness for people to want, if the British people said, no, you know what? We put national sovereignty, democratic accountability, controlling our own government and not being under the ECJ, etc. We put that over and above having a certain level of growth or easy travel to the continent. If people said, look, yeah, you've told us all these things, we believe you, but we still think we put this ahead of it, would you accept that? Because a lot of people who voted leave would say, well, you all said on the Remain side, you all said you'd accept the outcome of the referendum last time. Why would we believe you when you say you'd accept it this time?
Of course I'd accept it. We'd be out. And not only be out, we'd be out on terms certain. Admittedly, there's a whole future negotiation that's going to take years and years and years thereafter. But the terms of our departure would have been fully negotiated, approved by the public, and we'd be gone. And whilst I would disagree with that, I just have to shrug my shoulders and say that's it. That is a decision of the British people. They may wish to inflict a spot of self-mutilation on themselves, but if that's their choice, as a Democrat. I have to accept it.
And just finally, criticism of you overnight, along with other former ministers, Nick Bowles, Anna Soubry, also Sarah Wollaston, the Health Committee Chair, saying that you would resign the whip if we do end up going for a no deal, and that you therefore wouldn't have to vote in confidence for the Prime Minister if there is a vote of no confidence. Would you be willing to bring the government down over Brexit? Would you be willing to risk a general election and a Jeremy Corbyn government to stop Brexit?
The government will not survive a no-deal, chaotic Brexit. It's very, very simple. It's not a question of wanting to bring the government down. I have no desire to bring the government down. But the government won't survive. It won't be in a position to survive, and it will come to an end.
What about the concerns that actually if you don't deliver Brexit, you're going to be punished by your electorate after promising to deliver Brexit in your manifesto, and 70% of Tory members and Tory voters being Leave voters?
Political parties that don't deliver benefits to their supporters and to the wider public and aren't seen to be acting in the national interest have no business surviving. So I'm afraid politics is a harsh business. If you can't deliver, then you shouldn't be there.